Welcome to her journey, where we share stories of women who refuse to be silenced, diminished, or forgotten. If you've ever felt overlooked, undervalued, or cast aside, this story is for you. Don't just listen and leave. Hit subscribe so you'll never miss another story that speaks to your soul. Ring that notification bell, because today's story about Margaret Gerard will remind you that sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply refusing to disappear. Let's begin. My name is Margaret Gerard, and at 57 years old, I thought I understood disappointment. I thought I knew what it meant to be hurt by the people you love most. But standing on my son's porch that snowy Christmas evening in December 2023, holding a homemade pecan pie and wearing the crimson dress I'd bought specifically for this dinner, I learned that some wounds cut deeper than you ever imagined possible. The dress had cost me $250, more than I'd spent on myself in months. It was a beautiful deep red with delicate lace sleeves that made me feel elegant and festive. I'd found it at Nordstrom during their early Black Friday sale, and even though it stretched my budget as a widow living on a teacher's pension, I'd convinced myself it was worth it. This was Christmas with my family. This was my son David, my daughter-in-law Paige, and my precious 7-year-old granddaughter Emma. This was worth looking my best. I'd spent 2 hours getting ready that afternoon. A long bath with the expensive bath salts my friend Gloria had given me for my birthday in September. Carefully applied makeup to hide the fine lines that seemed to deepen every year since Robert's death 3 years ago. I'd even driven to the salon that morning for a professional blowout, something I rarely indulged in. The pecan pie was David's favorite, made from his late grandmother's recipe that I'd perfected over 30 years of marriage. I had started making it at 6 that morning, carefully toasting the pecans, making the filling from scratch, rolling out the pastry by hand the way Robert's mother had taught me when David was just a baby. It was the same pie I'd made for every Christmas dinner for the past 28 years. As I walked up the familiar path to David's house, the house I'd helped him and Paige pick out 5 years ago, the house where I'd babysat Emma countless times, the house where I'd spent the last 2 Christmases, I felt that warm anticipation that comes with family traditions. I was looking forward to seeing Emma open the gifts I'd carefully chosen and wrapped. I was looking forward to hearing about David's latest promotion at the engineering firm. I was even looking forward to hearing about Paige's book club and her volunteer work at the animal shelter. I knocked gently on the familiar oak door. The same door I'd helped them choose at Home Depot. The same door I'd walked through hundreds of times, sometimes with groceries when Paige was feeling overwhelmed with motherhood, sometimes with fresh flowers from my garden, sometimes just to spend time with my family because my empty house felt too quiet without Robert's presence. The door opened and there was Paige. Even in my heightened emotional state, I noticed how beautiful she looked. Her blonde hair was arranged in an elegant updo, her makeup was flawless, and she was wearing a designer dress in emerald green that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. She looked like she was ready for a magazine photo shoot, not a family dinner. But it wasn't her appearance that stopped my heart. It was the look in her eyes. There was no warmth, no welcome, no trace of the holiday spirit I'd expected. Instead, there was something cold and calculating, almost satisfied. "We don't want you here," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the threshold. Not quietly, not whispered with embarrassment or regret. She said it loudly enough for anyone passing by to hear, loudly enough for my son to hear from inside the house, loudly enough that there could be no misunderstanding. "Please leave," she added, as if the first blow hadn't been devastating enough. For a moment, my brain simply couldn't process what she'd said. Surely, this was some kind of terrible misunderstanding. Maybe they were running late. Maybe there was a family emergency. Maybe Emma was sick and they needed to cancel dinner. "I'm sorry, what?" I managed to say, my voice coming out smaller than I'd intended. "You heard me, Margaret. We don't want you here tonight. This is a family dinner, and frankly, you're not really part of this family anymore." The cruelty of those words hit me like a physical blow. Not part of this family anymore? I was David's mother. I was Emma's grandmother. I had been part of this family for 30 years, since the day David was born. How could I suddenly not be part of the family? I leaned slightly to peer past her into the warm, golden dining room, desperate to understand what was happening. There, gathered around the table I'd helped them pick out during their first Christmas as homeowners, were Paige's parents, Gerald and Susan, who'd always been polite but distant. There was Paige's sister Kelly with her husband Mark and their 2 teenage boys. There was Paige's brother Ryan with his new girlfriend, a blonde woman I didn't recognize. And there, at the head of the table, was my son David, my only child, the baby I'd rocked through countless sleepless nights when he had colic. The toddler I'd chased around this very neighborhood when we'd lived just 3 blocks away. The boy I'd cheered for at every soccer game, every school play, every science fair. The teenager I'd helped with homework and heartbreak. The young man I'd put through college with my teacher's salary and my late husband's life insurance money. He saw me. Our eyes met for just a moment through the doorway, and I saw recognition flash across his face. For a split second, I thought he would stand up, would tell his wife that this was unacceptable, would invite his mother into the home where she'd always been welcome. Instead, I watched him look down at his plate. I watched my 30-year-old son, this man I'd raised to be brave and kind and loyal, choose to study his mashed potatoes rather than defend his mother. He looked away. My son looked away while his wife humiliated me on Christmas Day. I brought pie, I whispered, holding up the ceramic dish with hands that had suddenly begun to tremble. David's favorite. The one your mother-in-law used to make. We already have dessert, Paige replied, her voice taking on an almost bored tone, as if my presence was merely an inconvenience rather than a devastating rejection. We don't need anything from you tonight. Or any other night, for that matter. I could hear Emma's voice from somewhere inside the house, probably playing with her cousins in the living room. My granddaughter, who used to run to the door when I visited, who loved when I read her stories and helped her bake cookies and taught her to plant flowers in my garden. Would she even know I'd been here? Would anyone tell her that Grandma Margaret had come for Christmas dinner and been turned away? Paige, please, I managed to say, though my voice was barely audible now. It's Christmas. Whatever I've done wrong, can't we talk about it? Can't we work this out? There's nothing to work out, Margaret. You've been told repeatedly that you're too involved in our lives, that you don't respect our boundaries, that you make me uncomfortable in my own home. Tonight, I decided I was done pretending everything was fine. The accusation hit me like a slap. Too involved? I babysat Emma when they needed a sitter. I brought dinner when Paige was sick. I helped with yard work when David was busy with a big project at work. Since when was being helpful considered too involved? I don't understand, I said, and I truly didn't. What boundaries? What have I done that made you uncomfortable? But Paige was already closing the door. Goodbye, Margaret. Don't come back uninvited. The door shut with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than a slam would have. I stood there on the porch, still holding that damned pie, still wearing my expensive dress, still trying to process what had just happened. Through the window, I could see the warm glow of Christmas lights, hear the faint sound of laughter and conversation resuming. I could smell the turkey dinner I wouldn't be sharing, see the shadows of people I wouldn't be hugging, glimpse the family celebration that was continuing without me as if I'd never been expected at all. Snow began to fall as I walked back to my car, each flake feeling like a tiny, cold reminder of how alone I suddenly was. I placed the pecan pie carefully on the passenger seat, this pie that had taken me hours to make, this pie that represented decades of Christmas traditions, this pie that no one wanted. As I drove home through the quiet streets of our small upstate New York town, I passed house after house glowing with warm light. Through windows, I could see families gathered around dinner tables, children playing with new toys, grandparents being hugged and kissed and valued. And I realized that for the first time in my 57 years, I truly understood what it meant to be completely, utterly alone. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, hope fluttered in my chest. Maybe it was David. Maybe he'd found his courage. Maybe he was coming after me to bring me back where I belonged. But it was just Gloria, my neighbor and closest friend since Robert's death. "How's Christmas dinner, honey?" "Tell David I said hi." I turned off my phone without responding. I couldn't bear to explain what had happened, not yet. Maybe not ever. When I got home, I sat in my driveway for 10 minutes, engine running, heat blasting, staring at the house Robert and I had bought when David was 12 years old. It was a good house, a pretty house, with the garden I'd spent years perfecting and the kitchen where I'd cooked thousands of meals for my family. But tonight, it felt like a monument to a life that no longer existed. I didn't cry. Not yet. I was still too shocked, too numb with disbelief. But somewhere deep in my chest, something hard and cold was beginning to form. Something that would change everything. 2 hours later, I sat at my kitchen table in the house that suddenly felt enormous around me. I'd finally taken off the crimson dress and hung it carefully in my closet, though I knew I'd never wear it again. I'd changed into my favorite pajamas, the soft flannel ones Robert used to tease me about, and made myself a cup of tea I couldn't bring myself to drink. The pecan pie sat untouched on the counter, mocking me. I couldn't bring myself to eat it, but I couldn't bring myself to throw it away either. It felt like evidence of something. My naivety, perhaps, or my misplaced belief that I mattered to the people I loved most. That's when the phone started ringing. The first call came at 8:17 p.m. I looked at the caller ID. David. I didn't answer. The second call came 30 seconds later. Then another. And another. I sat there, watching the phone ring over and over again, feeling a strange sense of power in my refusal to answer. Each ring felt like a small act of rebellion, a tiny way of saying that I wouldn't be summoned just because he decided he was ready to talk. By 9:47 p.m., the calling stopped. The display showed 103 missed calls. 103. As if the sheer volume of his panic could somehow undo what had happened, could somehow make me forget the image of him looking away when I needed him most. The voicemail light blinked accusingly at me. I stared at it for a long time before finally pressing play. "Mom, what the hell happened? I just realized you left. Paige said you didn't want to stay for dinner, but that doesn't make sense. Where did you go? Call me back." I deleted it immediately and played the next one. "Mom, Paige told me what really happened. Jesus Christ, I can't believe. I had no idea she was going to do that. I was in the bathroom when you came to the door. By the time I got back to the table, she said you'd decided not to stay. I should have known something was wrong. I should have called you immediately. Please call me back." Another deletion. Another message. "Mom, I'm freaking out here. I've been driving around town looking for your car. Gloria said you're not answering your landline or your cell. I went by the house, but all the lights are off. Where are you? Are you okay? This is my fault. I should have stood up for you. I should have stopped this from happening. Please call me back." By the 10th message, his voice was frantic, desperate. By the 20th, he was crying. By the 30th, he was begging. "Mom, I love you. Whatever Paige said, whatever she did, it doesn't represent how I feel. You're my mother. You're Emma's grandmother. You belong at our family dinner, and I'm so sorry that didn't happen tonight. I'm going to fix this. I promise I'm going to fix this. But I need to know you're safe first. Please just call me and tell me you're okay." I listened to 34 voicemails before I couldn't stand it anymore. Each one was more desperate than the last, David's voice cracking with emotion and guilt and fear. Part of me, The part that had spent 57 years being the understanding one, the peacemaker, the woman who smoothed over conflicts and forgave slights and kept the family together, wanted to call him back immediately. Wanted to tell him it was okay, that I understood, that we could work this out. But a larger part of me, a part one was just beginning to discover, whispered something different. It whispered that sorry wasn't enough. It whispered that I'd spent too many years making excuses for other people's bad behavior. It whispered that maybe, just maybe, it was time for Margaret Gerard to stop being so goddamn understanding. I deleted every single voicemail without listening to the rest. Then I walked over to the counter, picked up that beautiful pecan pie, the pie I'd made with love and hope and stubborn optimism, and held it over the garbage disposal. For a moment, I hesitated. This pie represented so much history, so many Christmas mornings when David was little and would sneak into the kitchen to steal pieces, while I pretended not to notice. But those days were gone. That little boy who'd loved his mother's baking had grown into a man who wouldn't defend her when she needed him most. I scraped the entire pie into the disposal, every last crumb of 30 years of tradition. I turned on the water and flipped the switch, watching years of Christmas memories disappear down the drain with a grinding, mechanical finality. The phone rang again. David, of course. Instead of ignoring it, I walked over and unplugged it from the wall. Then I turned off my cell phone and put it in a drawer. For the first time all day, I smiled. I poured myself a generous glass of the wine Robert and I had been saving for a special occasion, a bottle we'd never opened because there was always going to be a more special occasion next time. Well, this felt special enough. The night I stopped waiting for other people's permission to value myself felt pretty damn special. I sat at my kitchen table, sipping wine, and thinking about the look on Paige's face when she'd told me I wasn't part of the family anymore. There had been something almost triumphant in her expression, as if she'd been planning this moment for a long time. And then I thought about David's face when he'd looked away. The shame and guilt I'd seen there suggested he'd known something was coming. Maybe not the specific cruelty of being turned away at the door, but something. He'd known his wife was planning to hurt me, and he'd done nothing to stop it. That realization cut deeper than anything Paige had said. I could understand, if not forgive, a daughter-in-law who felt threatened or overwhelmed.
But my son?
My son was supposed to protect me, not enable my humiliation. I finished the wine and poured another glass. Then I sat down at my computer, the same computer David had patiently helped me set up 2 years ago, teaching me about email and social media with the kind of patience that had made me so proud of the man I'd raised. I opened Facebook and looked at Paige's profile. Her latest post, uploaded just an hour ago, was a photo of the family dinner I'd been excluded from. Everyone gathered around the table, smiling and laughing, with a caption, "So grateful for family time and all our Christmas blessings. #blessed, #family, #Christmas." Not one person had asked where I was. Not one person had wondered why David's mother wasn't in the family photo. I had been erased so completely that my absence didn't even warrant explanation. I stared at that photo for a long time, memorizing the faces of people who had watched me be humiliated and said nothing. Gerald and Susan, who had known me for 8 years and had never once stood up for me when Paige made her little cutting remarks. Kelly and Mark, who had always been polite but distant, more interested in their phones than conversation. Ryan and his girlfriend, who probably didn't even know who I was. And David. David with his arm around Paige, smiling at the camera as if this was the best Christmas ever. I took a screenshot of the photo before I could think better of it. I wasn't sure why, but something told me I might need evidence of this moment later. Then I did something I'd never done before. I unfollowed David and Paige on Facebook. Not unfriended. That would be too obvious, too dramatic. But unfollowed, so their perfect little life updates would no longer appear in my feed. It felt like the smallest possible act of rebellion, but it also felt like the beginning of something bigger. I went to bed that night with a strange sense of clarity. The shock was wearing off, replaced by something much more interesting. Anger. Not the hot, explosive kind that makes you say things you regret. No, this was different. This was cold and calculating and surprisingly energizing. As I lay in the dark, listening to the snow tap against my bedroom windows, I realized something important. I was done being the kind of woman who disappeared quietly when she became inconvenient. I was done making excuses for people who treated me badly. I was done being grateful for scraps of affection from people who should have treasured me. Margaret Gerard was about to get an education in fighting back, and I was going to be a very good student. I woke up on December 26th feeling different. Not better, exactly, but different. The crushing sadness of the night before had crystallized into something sharper, more focused. I made my coffee, Robert's special blend that I still bought, even though I was the only one drinking it now, and sat down at my computer with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. First, I did some research. I Googled how to sign someone up for mailing lists and anonymous mail services and legal ways to annoy someone. The internet, it turned out, was full of wonderfully creative people who had turned petty revenge into an art form. I started small, almost experimentally. Using a prepaid credit card I bought at the drugstore and a temporary email address, I signed David and Paige up for newsletter subscriptions from companies I'd never heard of, but that sounded appropriately annoying. Essential Oils MLM schemes that promised to change their lives forever. Tupperware parties in their area. Teeth whitening products with aggressive sales tactics that would email them daily before and after photos and testimonials. But as January progressed and I got more comfortable with the process, I got more creative. I signed them up for a monthly catalog of adult diapers, Dignity Plus Adult Incontinence Solutions, making sure to use Paige's full name so there would be no confusion about who the intended recipient was. I imagined her mortification when the mailman delivered a package clearly labeled with products for elderly bladder control for all the neighbors to see. I subscribed them to Goat Breeders Monthly. 12 issues, paid in advance. I could picture Paige trying to explain to her book club friends why she was suddenly receiving detailed articles about livestock care and barn management. The beauty of it was that each individual action was completely harmless. Annoying, perhaps, but not illegal or truly damaging. Just inconvenient. Like being told you're not welcome at your family's Christmas dinner. Every few days, I would add something new to their growing collection of unwanted mail. A catalog for orthopedic shoes. Newsletters about reverse mortgages. Brochures for retirement communities in Florida. Information about hearing aids and mobility scooters. I was careful to space them out, to use different methods, to avoid creating any obvious patterns. Within 3 weeks, I could imagine their mailbox overflowing with junk mail, their email inbox cluttered with promotional messages they'd never requested, their phone ringing with sales calls from companies they'd never heard of. My friend Gloria stopped by one afternoon in late January while I was researching how to send anonymous postcards online. "Margaret, honey, you look different," she said, settling herself at my kitchen table with the familiarity of someone who'd been coming over for coffee twice a week since Robert's funeral. "There's something, I don't know, more energetic about you." "I'm feeling more energetic," I admitted, closing my laptop before she could see what I was working on. "How was Christmas with David's family? You never really told me details." For a moment, I considered telling her the truth. Gloria had been my closest friend for years, the person I called when I needed to vent about Paige's passive-aggressive comments or David's tendency to cancel plans at the last minute. But something held me back. Maybe it was shame, or maybe it was the fear that saying it out loud would make it too real. "It was different this year," I said carefully. "Smaller gathering than usual." She studied my face with the sharp eyes of someone who'd known me for too long to be easily fooled. "Margaret, is everything all right between you and David?" I haven't seen his car in your driveway since before Christmas, and that's unusual. We're just giving each other some space right now. Sometimes families need that. Are you sure everything's okay? You seem different. Not bad different, just there's a spark in your eye I haven't seen since before Robert died. She was right. For the first time in 3 years, I felt truly alive. I had a project, a purpose, something that got me out of bed in the morning with anticipation instead of dread. I'm fine, Gloria. Better than fine, actually. I think I'm finally starting to figure some things out. After she left, I went back to my computer and placed an order that I was particularly proud of. I'd found a company that sold novelty items, the kind of products advertised in the back pages of magazines. After careful research, I found exactly what I was looking for, a selection of educational materials about personal relationships shipped in packaging that was definitely not discreet. I ordered a modest collection to be delivered to David and Paige's house, cash on delivery. The beauty of cash on delivery was that they'd have to interact with the delivery person, sign for the package, and pay for it before they could see what was inside. But the real genius was the return address, Passion Palace in bold red letters, with packaging that left no doubt about the nature of the contents. I timed the delivery for a Saturday afternoon in early February when I knew they'd likely be home, probably hosting one of Paige's dinner parties or book club meetings. I could picture it perfectly. The doorbell ringing just as Paige was serving her famous quinoa salad to the other wives from the country club, the delivery person standing there with a large box clearly labeled from an adult novelty company, Paige having to decide whether to accept the package in front of her guests or try to explain why she was refusing a delivery. Either choice would be deliciously uncomfortable. The phone had been ringing regularly throughout January, David calling my landline my cell phone, even trying to reach me through Gloria. But I wasn't ready to talk to him yet. Every time I saw his name on the caller ID, I remembered the look on his face when he'd chosen to look away instead of defending me. On February 1st, exactly 5 weeks after Christmas, I was in my garden checking on my winter plants when I saw David's car pull into my driveway. My stomach clenched with something that might have been anxiety or might have been excitement. I wasn't sure which. He got out of his car slowly, like a man approaching a dangerous animal. He looked terrible, unshaven, exhausted, wearing clothes that suggested he'd slept in them. Good, I thought with satisfaction. Let him suffer a little. Let him understand what it feels like to be rejected by someone you love. Mom, he called out tentatively as he approached my garden gate. Can we talk? I continued pruning my roses, not looking up. I'm busy, David. Please. I've been trying to reach you for over a month. I need to explain what happened. What's to explain? Your wife told me I'm not part of the family anymore, and you sat there and let it happen. Seems pretty clear to me. He flinched at the bluntness of my words. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. I had no idea Paige was planning to do what she did. I finally looked up at him. But you knew she was planning something, didn't you? The guilty look that crossed his face told me everything I needed to know. She said she wanted to have a conversation with you about boundaries. She said she needed some space to feel comfortable in her own home. I thought she meant she wanted to talk to you privately, maybe after dinner. I never thought she would. He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Turn me away at the door like a door-to-door salesman? Yes. God, Mom, I'm so sorry. The minute I realized what had happened, I started calling you. I've been worried sick. I went back to my pruning. You've been worried? How do you think I felt, David? How do you think it felt to be humiliated by your wife while you sat there and did nothing? I know, and I hate myself for it. I should have stood up for you. I should have told Paige that what she was doing was unacceptable. Why didn't you? He was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. Because I was a coward. Because it was easier to let her hurt you than to deal with the drama of standing up to her. because I chose the path of least resistance, and that path led right over your heart. I had to admit, I hadn't expected that level of honesty from him. For a moment, my anger wavered. This was my son, the child I'd raised to be better than this. But then I remembered the look on his face when he turned away from me, and my resolve hardened. David, I need you to understand something. I'm not the same person I was 5 weeks ago. The mother who would have immediately forgiven you and pretended this never happened? She's gone. What does that mean? It means that if you want any kind of relationship with me going forward, you're going to have to earn it. You're going to have to prove that you value me enough to stand up for me when it matters. I do value you. You're my mother. You're the most important person in my life.
No, David.
I was the most important person in your life until you got married. Now I'm just an inconvenience you have to manage. The question is whether you're going to choose to change that or not. We talked for another 20 minutes, circling around the hurt and the disappointment and the love that still existed despite everything. When he left, I felt emotionally drained but also strangely victorious. I'd spoken my truth without backing down, without making excuses for his behavior, without rushing to make him feel better about his choices. That afternoon, I placed an order for a year subscription to Survivalist Weekly to be sent to their house. If Paige wanted to paint me as unstable, I might as well give her some evidence to work with. But something else happened that day that would change everything. My neighbor Mrs. Patterson mentioned seeing a young girl at my fence earlier in the week. That's Lila, she said. My granddaughter. She's been asking about you, actually. Says you seem mysteriously different lately. Teenagers notice everything, don't they? Indeed they did. By mid-February, I developed a sophisticated system for my revenge campaign. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I would research new ways to introduce minor chaos into David and Paige's perfectly ordered life. Nothing illegal, nothing truly harmful, just a steady stream of inconveniences that would remind them that actions have consequences. I discovered the joy of anonymous postcards, a service originally designed for vacation greetings that I'd repurposed for more creative uses. My first postcard read, "Congratulations on your new ferret. Your neighbors are so excited to meet Whiskers. The Henderson family." I made sure it was addressed to David and Paige, but clearly visible to anyone handling their mail. The second postcard was even better. "Thank you for volunteering to host the annual Nudist Society potluck. We'll see you Saturday at 7 p.m. Clothing strictly prohibited. Central New York Freedom Society." But it was Lila Patterson who would transform my small-scale revenge into something much bigger. Lila was 16, all confidence and social media savvy, with the kind of sharp observational skills that come naturally to her generation. She caught me in my kitchen one afternoon in late February, chuckling to myself as I browsed through a website called Embarrassing Gift Company. "Mrs. Gerard," she said, appearing at my back door. "What's so funny?" I looked up, startled. I'd been so absorbed in comparing inflatable lawn decorations that I hadn't heard her approach. "Oh, nothing, dear. Just reading something amusing online." She tilted her head, studying me with eyes that missed nothing. "You know, my grandma says your son hasn't been around much lately, which is weird because his car used to be here like every weekend." I minimized the browser window. "Family relationships can be complicated, Lila." "Yeah, tell me about it." "My parents are divorced, and they can't be in the same room without drama." She hopped up on my counter with teenage boldness. "But seriously, what were you looking at? I saw you comparing products. Are you shopping for something fun?" Her directness was refreshing. Before I knew it, I was telling her everything. About Christmas dinner, about the closed door, about David looking away, about the phone calls and the newsletters and the adult novelty packages. Lila listened with the kind of focused attention adults rarely give each other, her eyes growing wider with each detail. When I finished, she was grinning from ear to ear. Mrs. Gerard, you're like a revenge goddess. This is absolutely epic. I don't know about that. It's just brilliant, because that's what it is. She pulled out her phone. You know what? You should totally document this. Document what? Your revenge journey. People would eat this up. There's this whole community online of people sharing their petty revenge stories. You could be like the queen of it. I shook my head immediately. Oh, I don't think that's a good idea. I'm not really a social media person, and besides, what if someone recognized me? But that's what would make it perfect. You're like this sweet retired teacher lady who went savage after her family treated her terribly. People love that kind of transformation story. And we can totally disguise you. She spent the next 2 hours showing me various social media platforms, explaining how people shared stories, how videos went viral, how ordinary people became internet celebrities. It was fascinating and terrifying in equal measure. She showed me TikTok videos of people sharing family drama, YouTube channels dedicated to revenge stories, Reddit threads where people compared notes on dealing with difficult relatives. There was an entire online ecosystem of people who had been hurt by their families and were fighting back in creative ways. Look at this, she said, showing me a video of a woman about my age telling a story about her son-in-law. She's got hundreds of thousands of followers just for sharing how she dealt with family drama. People are starving for this kind of content. Real stories about real people standing up for themselves. But what if David and Paige saw it? What if people in town recognized me? That's why we use a disguise. I've got some ideas. She disappeared and came back with a bag full of props. Oversized sunglasses, colorful scarves, even a hat with a wide brim. We spent an hour experimenting with different combinations. The key, she explained as she adjusted a silk scarf around my neck, is to be recognizable as a character, but not recognizable as Margaret Gerard. You need a signature look that becomes your brand. We settled on oversized sunglasses and a silk scarf combination that completely obscured my features while still allowing my personality to shine through. For my username, she suggested several options before I chose one that felt right. Ms. D, I said firmly. That's what I want to be called. What does the D stand for? Lila asked. Dignity. I replied without hesitation. It stands for dignity. That's perfect. Okay, let's make your first video. She set up her phone on a stack of books, adjusted the lighting with the expertise of someone who'd grown up creating content, and coached me through the basics of talking to a camera. Just tell your story, she said. Be honest. Be real. Don't try to be perfect or polished. People can spot fake from a mile away, but they connect with authentic. My first video was simple but powerful. I sat in my living room, face obscured by my disguise, and told my story. I spoke about Christmas dinner, about the closed door, about my son looking away. I talked about the pain of being rejected by the people you love most, about the particular cruelty of being made to feel unwelcome in your own family. But then I talked about fighting back. Not with screaming or dramatic confrontations, but with quiet, persistent inconvenience. I described the newsletters and the catalogs, the postcards and the packages. I talked about finding power in small acts of rebellion, about discovering that you don't have to suffer in silence just because someone expects you to. Sometimes, I said, looking directly into the camera, the most radical thing you can do is refuse to disappear quietly. They wanted me gone?
Fine.
But they're going to remember that I was here. Lila uploaded the video to TikTok and YouTube with the title, Revenge of the Holiday Reject, #RevengeGranny Part 1. She created accounts on multiple platforms, always using the same Ms. D branding. Now we wait, she said, showing me how to check view counts and read comments. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, the video had hundreds of views. By the next morning, it had thousands. By the end of the week, it had reached 50,000 views across all platforms. The comments were incredible. Person after person sharing their own stories of family rejection, of being treated badly by in-laws, of children who chose their spouses over their parents. But more than that, they were cheering for me. "You go, Ms. D," wrote one commenter. "Your son doesn't deserve you." "I wish I had your courage," wrote another. "My mother-in-law treats me like dirt, but I just take it because I'm afraid of losing my grandkids." "This is the energy I need in my life," wrote a third. "Thank you for showing us that we don't have to be doormats. Please make more videos. I need to know what happens next." I found myself reading every single comment, feeling a warmth and connection I hadn't experienced in months. These strangers understood me in a way my own family never had. They saw my worth when the people who should have valued me most had thrown me away. Lila was ecstatic. "Mrs. G, I mean Ms. D, this is incredible. People are sharing your video, tagging their friends. You've got over 2,000 followers already, and it's only been 3 days. What does that mean?" "It means people want to hear more from you. They want to follow your journey. You've tapped into something that really resonates with people." Over the next few weeks, we made more videos. I demonstrated how to sign people up for unwanted catalogs. Remember, always use a prepaid credit card and a temporary email address. I shared the art of anonymous postcard sending. The key is to make it embarrassing but not threatening. You want confusion, not a police report. I talked about the psychology of petty revenge. People think revenge has to be dramatic to be satisfying, I said in one video that got particularly popular. But sometimes the most effective revenge is just refusing to let someone's bad behavior slide by unnoticed. Every time David and Paige have to explain to their mailman why they're getting catalogs for adult diapers, they're forced to remember that their actions had consequences. By the end of March, I had over 20,000 followers across all platforms. People were sharing my content in Facebook groups, discussing my story on Reddit, even creating fan art of Ms. D. Comments poured in from people all over the world, thanking me for giving them permission to stand up for themselves. But more importantly, I was becoming someone I genuinely liked and respected. Someone who spoke honestly about difficult topics. Someone who refused to accept poor treatment in the name of keeping the peace. The old Margaret would have been horrified by what I was doing. The new Margaret, Ms. D, was just getting started. By April, my channel had exploded beyond anything Lila and I had imagined. What had started as a few thousand people interested in my story had grown into a community of over 100,000 followers who called themselves Ms. D's Dignity Squad. I was posting new content 3 times a week. Petty revenge tutorials on Mondays, story time with Ms. D on Wednesdays, and Wisdom Wednesdays, where I shared life advice filtered through my newfound understanding of self-worth. The tutorials were particularly popular. I'd created an entire curriculum of harmless but effective ways to annoy people who'd wronged you. How to sign someone up for Scientology information packets. The art of glitter bombs that don't actually explode. Anonymous gift giving. A masterclass in confusion. My personal favorite was the episode where I demonstrated the proper way to send someone a subscription to Barely Legal Fishing magazine. The beauty of this particular choice, I explained to the camera while holding up a sample issue, is that it will horrify your target without actually being inappropriate. It's about young fishermen, people, not what your dirty minds might think. But good luck explaining that to your neighbors. The Storytime episodes were where I shared updates on my ongoing campaign against David and Paige. By this point, their mailbox had become a daily source of confusion. In addition to the catalogs I'd already set up, I'd added subscriptions to Goat Fancy, Pickle Enthusiast Monthly, and the Journal of Competitive Eating. But my masterpiece had been the Valentine's Day surprise in February. I'd hired a singing telegram service to deliver a personalized song to their house on February 14th. The performer, A middle-aged man in a ridiculous Cupid costume serenaded them with a custom song I'd written about, the magic of unexpected family reconciliation. According to my reconnaissance, I'd driven by their house that afternoon. Half the neighborhood had come outside to watch the performance. Paige had looked absolutely mortified, while David had appeared to be suppressing either laughter or rage. But it was the Wisdom Wednesday episodes that really touched people's hearts. These were where I talked about the deeper lessons I was learning about family, forgiveness, and self-respect. You don't owe anyone unlimited chances to hurt you, I said in one particularly popular episode. Forgiveness is a gift, not an obligation, and some people haven't earned it yet. In another, I addressed the fear that many of my followers expressed about standing up for themselves. People will tell you that fighting back makes you just as bad as the people who hurt you. But there's a difference between defending yourself and attacking others. There's a difference between demanding respect and demanding submission. Don't let anyone convince you that setting boundaries makes you the villain. The comments on these videos were often heartbreaking. Person after person sharing stories of being mistreated by family members, of being told to keep the peace by accepting unacceptable behavior, of feeling guilty for wanting basic respect and kindness. But then came the day that changed everything. It was early May, and I was editing my latest tutorial on how to send someone a surprise mariachi band when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Is this Margaret Gerard? The voice was young, professional, with the crisp confidence of someone used to getting answers. My blood went cold. Who's asking? This is Jennifer Walsh. I'm Paige's cousin. I think we need to talk. Jennifer had been at Christmas dinner, one of the silent witnesses to my humiliation. What could she possibly want with me now? I'm not sure we have anything to discuss, I said carefully. Actually, we do, because I know who Ms. D is. The world seemed to stop. I sat down heavily in my kitchen chair, staring at the laptop screen where my disguised face was frozen mid-sentence. I don't know what you're talking about. Margaret, I've been watching your videos for weeks. You can disguise your face all you want, but you can't disguise your voice. And some of the details you've shared, only someone who was actually there that night would know them. I closed my eyes, my mind racing. How many other people had figured it out? How long before David and Paige discovered that their humiliated mother was internet famous? What do you want? Asked finally. I want to help you. That was not what I'd expected. Excuse me? Margaret, what Paige did to you is cruel and deliberate. I tried to say something that night, but she shut me down. She said it was family business and I should stay out of it. But I couldn't stop thinking about how you looked when she turned you away. We met that afternoon at a coffee shop in the next town over. Jennifer was younger than I'd remembered, probably early 30s, with kind eyes and an earnest manner that immediately put me at ease. First, she said, settling into the booth across from me, I want you to know that what happened at Christmas wasn't spontaneous. Paige planned it. What do you mean, planned it? Jennifer pulled out her phone and showed me a series of text messages. She sent these to our family group chat 3 days before Christmas. I read the messages with growing horror. Finally going to put Margaret in her place this year. So tired of pretending to like her. She acts like she's David's wife instead of his mother. Time for a reality check. Going to tell her she's not welcome at dinner. David will be upset, but he'll get over it. It's time she learned that I'm the woman in his life now, not her. The cruelty of it took my breath away. She hadn't acted in anger or frustration. She had deliberately planned to humiliate me on Christmas Day. Did anyone in your family try to stop her? I asked. Jennifer looked ashamed. My mom said it seemed harsh, but Paige said you'd been boundary crossing for years and needed to be taught a lesson. Everyone else just stayed quiet. And David? Did he know? She told him she was going to have a conversation with you about expectations, but she didn't tell him the specifics. He thought she meant after dinner, privately. When he realized what had actually happened, he was furious with her. They had a huge fight that night after everyone left. This information was both vindicating and devastating. I'd been right that David hadn't known the full extent of what Paige was planning, but he'd known something was coming and hadn't warned me. "There's more," Jennifer said. "Would you like to see what Paige has been saying about you in our family chat for months?" She showed me message after message of Paige complaining about me. How I called too often. How I gave unwanted advice. How I made her feel like a guest in her own home. How David was too attached to his mother and needed to cut the apron strings. But the messages also revealed something else. Paige was deeply insecure about her relationship with David. She complained that he compared her cooking to mine, that he mentioned my opinions too often, that he still had photos of Robert and me displayed in their house. "She's threatened by you," Jennifer observed. "Has been from the beginning." Instead of dealing with her own insecurities, she decided to eliminate the competition. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because what she did was wrong, and someone needs to call her out on it. And because I think the world deserves to know the truth about what really happened that night." Jennifer leaned forward, her eyes bright with possibility. "What if you told the real story? Not just your side, but the whole truth? You've got this huge platform now, all these people who believe in you. What if you showed them the proof of what Paige actually did?" The idea was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. For months, I'd been fighting back with anonymous pranks and coded references. But this would be different. This would be a direct confrontation, a public revelation of the truth.
"She'll deny it," I said.
"She'll say the messages are fake or taken out of context. Let her try. I'll back you up. I was there that night, and I can confirm every detail of your story." I thought about all the people who'd commented on my videos, sharing their own stories of family cruelty and public humiliation. How many of them were still protecting their abusers' reputations? "I need time to think about it," I said finally. "Of course. But Margaret? Don't think too long. Paige has been asking questions about your videos. I think she's starting to put two and two together." That night, I called Lila and told her everything. She listened without interruption, her teenage mind processing the implications faster than my own. "Mrs. G, this is huge," she said when I finished. "If you do this, if you reveal everything, there's no going back. It changes everything." "I know. But think about it. Right now, Paige controls the narrative. She gets to tell people that you're just a bitter old woman who can't accept that her son has his own family. But if you show the proof of what she actually did, she'll be the one who looks bad," I finished. "Exactly. And all those people who've been following your journey, they'll know that you're not just seeking revenge. You're seeking justice." I spent the rest of the night thinking about Jennifer's offer, about the screenshots burning a hole in my email inbox, about the choice between continuing to fight in the shadows or stepping into the light. By morning, I had made my decision. It was time for Ms. G to take off her disguise. I spent 3 days crafting the video that would change everything. Unlike my usual quick productions, this one required careful planning, multiple drafts, and the kind of courage I wasn't sure I possessed. Lila came over every evening to help me rehearse, offering suggestions on pacing and delivery while I wrestled with the decision to reveal my face to the world. "Are you sure about this?" she asked on Wednesday night as we reviewed the final script. "Once you post this, everyone will know who you are. Your neighbors, people at the grocery store, your doctor, everyone in this town." "I've been hiding for 5 months," I replied, adjusting the camera angle one more time. "I'm tired of hiding." The video began the same way all my others did, with me in my signature disguise sitting in my living room. But this time, there was a weight to my words that my regular followers would immediately recognize. "Hello, my beautiful Dignity Squad. Today's video is different from all the others because today I'm going to tell you the whole truth about what happened to me. Not just my side of the story, but the actual, documented truth. I held up my phone, showing the screenshots Jennifer had provided. What I'm about to show you is proof that my humiliation on Christmas Day wasn't a moment of poor judgment or a family misunderstanding. It was a deliberate, premeditated attack designed to hurt me as much as possible. I read the text messages aloud, my voice steady despite the pain of reliving Paige's words. The pleasure she'd taken in planning my humiliation. The satisfaction she'd expressed at finally putting me in my place. This woman didn't just exclude me from one dinner. I continued. She spent months plotting ways to make me feel unwelcome in my own son's life. And when she finally got the chance to destroy me publicly, she took it with enthusiasm. Then came the moment I'd been building toward for days. I reached up and slowly removed my sunglasses, then unwound the scarf from around my neck. My name is Margaret Gerard. I'm 57 years old. I live in Cooperstown, New York, and I'm tired of being ashamed of standing up for myself. For the first time in months, I looked directly into the camera with my real face, my real eyes, showing the world exactly who I was. I've been hiding behind Ms. D because I was afraid of what people would think if they knew that their sweet, quiet neighbor was capable of fighting back. But you know what? I'm not ashamed anymore. I'm proud of what I've become. I'm proud of refusing to disappear quietly. I'm proud of showing other people that they don't have to accept abuse just because it comes from family. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, the video had hundreds of thousands of views. By the next morning, it had reached over 2 million. Comments poured in from people who had never seen such a clear example of someone standing up to family abuse with both dignity and proof. But more importantly, the video accomplished exactly what I'd hoped. It shifted the narrative completely. Instead of being seen as a bitter woman seeking petty revenge, I was now viewed as someone who had been systematically targeted and had fought back with remarkable restraint and creativity. The knock on my door came at 7 a.m. the next morning. I looked through the peephole to see David standing on my porch, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Behind him, parked in my driveway, was Paige's car. This was the confrontation I'd been both dreading and anticipating for months. I opened the door. "Mom," David said, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. "We need to talk." Behind him, Paige stepped into view. She looked smaller than I remembered, diminished somehow. Her usual perfect composure was cracked around the edges, and I could see fear in her eyes. "Hello, Paige," I said calmly. "Interesting morning?" "Margaret, please," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Can we come in? We need to discuss this situation privately." "What situation would that be? The situation where you plan to humiliate me on Christmas? Or the situation where the entire internet now knows exactly what kind of person you really are?" David stepped forward. "Mom, I know you're angry. I know we both screwed up badly. But this video, it's everywhere. People are sharing it, talking about it. Paige's name is trending on social media." "Good," I said simply. "Actions have consequences, David. It's a lesson I learned a little late in life, but I'm a quick study." "Please," Paige said again, tears starting to form in her eyes. "I made a mistake. I was wrong. But this is destroying my reputation, my career. People are calling my workplace, posting horrible things about me online." I couldn't help but smile grimly. "And how do you think I felt when you planned to destroy me in front of your entire family?" "I'll make you a deal," I said, still standing in my doorway. "You can come in for exactly 30 minutes. You can say whatever you need to say. But I'm not promising to make this go away, and I'm not promising to forgive you just because you're finally facing consequences for your choices." They followed me into my living room, where they sat together on the couch like defendants awaiting sentencing. I chose the chair across from them, the position of power I'd never claimed in our relationship before.
Talk, I said.
What followed was the most honest conversation we'd ever had, and the most devastating. David spoke first, his words tumbling out in a rush of guilt and desperation. Mom, I've been replaying that night over and over for 5 months, trying to figure out how I could have been such a coward. When Paige said she wanted to talk to you about boundaries, I should have asked more questions. I should have insisted on being part of that conversation. I should have protected you. But you didn't, I said simply. No, I didn't. And I hate myself for it. I hate that I let you down when you needed me most. I hate that I chose the easy path instead of the right one. I studied my son's face, seeing genuine remorse there, but also something else, a kind of exhaustion that suggested this wasn't the first time he'd had to apologize for his wife's behavior. David, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. How long has Paige been complaining about me? He glanced nervously at his wife, then back at me. Mom, I don't think. How long? Paige spoke up, her voice barely audible. Since before we were married. The admission hung in the air between us like a toxic cloud. 8 years, I said slowly. You've been resentful of me for 8 years, and instead of talking to me about it, you decided to poison my son against me. I didn't poison him against you, Paige protested weakly. Then what would you call it? What exactly did you tell him about me? She looked down at her hands, unable to meet my eyes. I told him you were too involved in our relationship, that you made me feel like I was competing with you for his attention, that you acted more like his wife than his mother. And did it ever occur to you to talk to me about these feelings instead of spending 8 years building a case against me? I tried. I dropped hints, I made comments. You expected me to read your mind and voluntarily remove myself from my son's life because you were uncomfortable sharing his affection? The bluntness of my words made her flinch, but I wasn't finished. Paige, I need you to understand something. I never tried to compete with you for David's love. I was his mother long before you were his wife, and I'll be his mother long after. I paused meaningfully. Well, whatever happens between you two. David's head snapped up.
What do you mean by that?
I looked between them, seeing the tension that crackled even when they were trying to present a united front. I mean that a marriage built on one person's need to eliminate everyone else from their spouse's life isn't really a marriage. It's ownership. Paige finally looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. I know I was wrong. I know I handled everything badly. But I was so afraid of losing David. You were so perfect, so beloved by everyone. His friends all adored you. His coworkers talked about how lucky he was to have such a great mother. I felt like I could never measure up. So, you decided to tear me down instead of building yourself up? I thought if I could just create some distance between you and David, then our marriage would be stronger. Then he would focus on our family instead of constantly thinking about his mother. David turned to stare at his wife, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. Paige, my mother wasn't a threat to our marriage. She was an asset. She helped us, supported us, loved our daughter. Why would you want to eliminate that from our lives? Because I wanted to be enough for you. Paige exploded, her careful composure finally cracking completely. I wanted to be the most important woman in your life, not second place to your mother. You were never in second place, David said quietly. You were my wife. That's a completely different relationship than what I have with my mother. They don't compete because they serve different roles. I watched this exchange with fascination and sadness. Here was the root of the problem. Paige's fundamental misunderstanding of how love works. She seemed to believe that love was a finite resource, that any affection David showed me was affection stolen from her. Paige, I said gently, love isn't a pie. David loving me doesn't mean there's less love available for you. In fact, a man who loves his mother well is usually a man who knows how to love his wife well. You didn't need to eliminate me to secure your place in his heart. I know that now, she whispered. But I was so young when we got married, so insecure. And instead of growing out of those feelings, I let them fester until they turned into something ugly. And what about Emma? I asked, my voice harder now. What about the fact that your insecurity cost my granddaughter her relationship with her grandmother for 5 months? This hit both of them like a physical blow. David put his head in his hands. Emma has been asking about you constantly, he said. She doesn't understand why Grandma Margaret doesn't come over anymore. We told her you were busy, that you were traveling, but she's 7. She's not stupid. She knows something's wrong. She drew you a picture last week, Paige added softly. You and her in your garden, planting flowers. She asked me to give it to you, but She trailed off, unable to finish. You what? I threw it away, because I was still angry, still resentful, still so wrapped up in my own feelings that I couldn't see how much I was hurting my own daughter. The room fell silent. In that moment, I saw exactly who Paige really was. Not a calculating villain, but a deeply insecure woman who had made increasingly terrible choices to protect her fragile sense of self-worth. But understanding someone's motivations doesn't excuse their actions. Here's what's going to happen, I said finally. David, you and Paige are going to marriage counseling. Individual therapy, too. You need to figure out why you thought it was acceptable to enable this behavior for 8 years. Mom. I'm not finished. Paige, you're going to make a public apology. Not on Facebook, not in some private message. A real video, taking responsibility for what you did. Margaret, please, David interjected. A public apology will just keep this story going longer.
No, David.
She humiliated me publicly, with an audience. Now she can take responsibility publicly. Those are my terms. I stood up, signaling that the conversation was coming to an end. And understand this. I'm not the same woman I was 5 months ago. I don't need your approval to be happy anymore. I don't need your presence in my life to feel complete. What I need is respect. And until you can offer me that consistently, we don't have much to discuss. After they left, I sat in my quiet house and felt something I hadn't experienced in years, complete peace with my own choices. That evening, I made another video. This time, there was no disguise, no hiding. Just Margaret Gerard, sitting in her living room, speaking directly to the camera. Hello, beautiful souls. Today I had the conversation I've been avoiding for 5 months. My son and daughter-in-law came to my house to ask for forgiveness, to try to make things right. I paused, considering my words carefully. A few months ago, I would have immediately accepted their apologies and tried to pretend none of this ever happened. I would have been so grateful to have them back in my life that I would have minimized my own pain and their responsibility for causing it. I leaned forward, speaking more intensely. But that woman doesn't exist anymore. She died on Christmas Day when she was told she wasn't part of the family anymore. What emerged from her ashes was someone stronger, someone who understands that forgiveness without accountability is just enabling. The video ended with me sharing my terms for reconciliation, not as a way to shame David and Paige further, but as a demonstration for my followers of what setting real boundaries looked like. You don't have to accept apologies that come without change, I concluded. You don't have to be grateful for scraps of respect from people who should treasure you. You are allowed to have standards for how you're treated, even by family. Especially by family. The response was immediate and overwhelming. But the comment that meant the most came from someone named David_. Mom, I watched your video. You're right about everything. Paige and I have scheduled our first counseling appointment. We have a lot of work to do. It was a start. Summer brought unexpected changes to my life. My story had touched a nerve that reached far beyond my small town in upstate New York. By July, I had over 800,000 followers across all platforms, and my inbox was flooded with interview requests, speaking opportunities, and book deals. But more importantly, I was encountering people in real life who recognized me and shared their own stories. At the grocery store, at the post office, even at my doctor's appointment, people would approach me with tears in their eyes, thanking me for giving them permission to stand up for themselves. "You saved my relationship with my daughter," one woman told me in the cereal aisle at Wegmans. "I watched your videos and realized I'd been letting my son-in-law treat me terribly because I was afraid of losing access to my grandchildren. Your story gave me the courage to set boundaries." These encounters reminded me daily that my personal pain had become something larger, a movement of people who were tired of accepting poor treatment from family members. On a hot Tuesday in late July, Paige posted her public apology. Lila and I watched it together in my air-conditioned living room, both of us holding our breath as the video began. Paige sat in what looked like her living room, no makeup, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked younger somehow, and infinitely more vulnerable than I'd ever seen her. "My name is Paige Gerard," she began, her voice shaky but clear. 3 months ago, a video went viral that exposed some text messages I sent about my mother-in-law, Margaret Gerard. I'm here today to take full responsibility for my actions and to publicly apologize for the pain I've caused. She took a deep breath before continuing. On Christmas Day 2023, I deliberately and cruelly excluded Margaret from our family dinner. This wasn't a spontaneous decision or a moment of poor judgment. I planned it. I thought about how to hurt her most effectively, and then I executed that plan with an audience of my family members who watched it happen. I felt Lila squeeze my hand as Paige continued. For months before that night, I had been complaining about Margaret to my family, trying to build a case for why she was a problem in our lives. The truth is, Margaret was never the problem. My own insecurity was the problem. My inability to understand that love isn't a competition was the problem. Paige's voice cracked, but she pushed through. "Margaret Gerard is an extraordinary woman who raised an incredible son. She welcomed me into her family with open arms, treated me like the daughter she never had, and loved my daughter with the fierce devotion only a grandmother can provide. And I repaid that love by trying to eliminate her from our lives because I was threatened by how much everyone loved her." She wiped her eyes but kept talking. "I want to address the people who have been defending me online, saying that Margaret's response was disproportionate or vindictive. It wasn't. What she did was refuse to disappear quietly after being publicly humiliated by someone she had every right to trust. She fought back against cruelty with creativity and humor, and she inspired hundreds of thousands of people to stand up for themselves in the process." Paige looked directly into the camera. "Margaret, I know this apology doesn't undo the damage I've done. I know it doesn't erase the months of pain I caused you. But I want you to know that I'm committed to becoming someone worthy of your forgiveness, whether or not you ever choose to give it." She concluded by announcing that she and David were in intensive therapy, both together and individually, and that she was working with a therapist to understand and address the insecurity and controlling behavior that had led to this situation. "To everyone who has been following this story," she ended, "please don't let my mistakes discourage you from standing up for yourselves when you're mistreated. Margaret Gerard showed us all what dignity looks like, and the world is better for it." The video was raw, honest, and clearly difficult for her to make. More importantly, it was exactly what I had asked for, a public acknowledgement of responsibility without excuses or justifications. "Wow," Lila said when it ended. "That was actually really good." I wasn't sure she had it in her. I found myself feeling something I hadn't expected, respect for Paige. Not forgiveness, not yet, but respect for her willingness to face the consequences of her actions publicly and honestly. My phone rang almost immediately. "David." For the first time in 7 months, I answered on the first ring. Mom. His voice was thick with emotion. Did you see Paige's video? I did. What did you think? I considered my words carefully. I think it was a good first step. It was honest, it was accountable, and it was clearly difficult for her to make. I respect her for doing it. Does this mean, do you think we can start to work toward healing our family? David, healing isn't something that happens because someone makes a nice apology video. Healing is work. It's consistent, daily choices to be better than you were before. It's proving through actions that you've actually changed. I know, and we're committed to doing that work. Both of us.
Good.
But I need you to understand something. Our relationship will never be the same as it was before. I've learned too much about myself to go back to being the woman who accepted whatever scraps of affection you were willing to give me. I don't want you to go back to that. Mom, watching your videos, seeing how strong and confident you've become, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of the woman you've discovered inside yourself. This conversation felt surreal. My son telling me he was proud of me for the way I'd fought back against his own poor treatment of me. I love you, David. I've never stopped loving you. But love isn't enough anymore. Love has to come with respect, with consistency, with the willingness to defend me when I need defending. I understand. And I promise you, Mom, the next time anyone treats you badly, family or not, I will stand up for you. I will never let anyone humiliate you again, especially not my wife. We'll see, I said. Actions speak louder than words, sweetheart. That evening, I sat in my garden with a cup of tea, thinking about the strange journey that had brought me to this moment. In 3 weeks, it would be my 58th birthday, a milestone I would reach as a completely different person than I'd been at 57. A year ago, I'd been a woman who defined herself through other people's approval, who was grateful for any attention from her family, who would rather have died than caused a scene. Now I was a woman with nearly 1 million followers who looked to me for wisdom about standing up for themselves. I had speaking requests, book offers, and interview opportunities flooding my inbox daily. But more than that, I had become someone I genuinely liked and respected. Someone who spoke honestly about difficult topics. Someone who refused to accept poor treatment in the name of keeping the peace. Someone who understood that love without respect is just manipulation wearing a prettier mask. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mrs. Gerard, this is Emma. Daddy helped me get your phone number. I miss you so much. Can I come visit you soon? I want to show you the flower seeds I've been growing. Love, your granddaughter Emma. I'm 7 now. My granddaughter. Sweet Emma, who had been caught in the middle of this adult drama through no fault of her own. I texted back immediately. I would love that more than anything, sweetheart.
Come anytime.
Grandma Margaret has missed you more than you can imagine. Within an hour, David's car was in my driveway. Emma bounded out and ran to my front door, her energy unchanged despite the months of family chaos. Grandma Margaret, she squealed, throwing herself into my arms with the kind of uncomplicated love that only children can offer. Hello, my darling girl, I said, hugging her tight and breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. I've missed you so very much. David stood awkwardly by his car, clearly unsure whether he was welcome to come closer. David, I called out, come inside. Let's have some coffee while Emma shows me her seeds. And just like that, the very slow process of rebuilding our family began. Over the following weeks, Emma visited me every Saturday. We worked in the garden together, baked cookies, and slowly rebuilt the relationship that Paige's actions had interrupted. Emma never asked directly about why I'd been absent from her life, but she seemed to understand that the adults had made some mistakes that were now being fixed. Mommy says she was mean to you, and that's why we didn't see you for a while. She told me one afternoon as we planted tulip bulbs for next spring. Sometimes adults make mistakes and hurt people they love, I replied carefully. The important thing is that we learn from those mistakes and try to do better. Are you still sad about it? I considered the question carefully. Was I still sad? There was definitely still hurt there, still some anger, still grief for the time we'd lost and the trust that had been broken. But there was also something else. Pride in who I'd become through the struggle, satisfaction in the boundaries I'd learned to set, joy in the life I'd built for myself. I'm not sad anymore, Emma.
I'm grateful.
Grateful? Grateful that I learned how strong I really am. Grateful that I found my voice. Grateful that our family learned how to love each other better. As September arrived and I prepared for what would be our first family interaction in nearly 10 months, David called to discuss logistics for my birthday celebration. I want to do something special for you, Mom, he said. What would make your 58th birthday meaningful? The old Margaret would have immediately said that just being included was enough, that she didn't need anything special. But the new Margaret had different answers. I want to host, I said. I want the celebration to be at my house, where I feel comfortable and confident. I want to cook the foods I love, use the recipes that connect me to your father and grandmother. I want to create new traditions alongside the old ones. That sounds perfect. What can we bring? What can we do to help? Just show up with grateful hearts and a willingness to be present. That's all I've ever really wanted. As I hung up the phone, I realized that this conversation, this easy negotiation of boundaries and preferences, would have been impossible a year ago. Then, I would have been so afraid of asking for too much that I would have asked for nothing. Now, I knew my worth and expected others to recognize it too. My birthday party that September was small but perfect. David, Paige, and Emma came over for an afternoon celebration in my garden. Paige was different, quieter, more thoughtful, genuinely interested in hearing about my life rather than just waiting for her turn to talk. The therapy was clearly working. But the moment that mattered most came when Emma presented me with a handmade card. I made this for you, Grandma Margaret, she said, bouncing on her toes with excitement. The card was decorated with crayon drawings of flowers and hearts, and inside, in her careful 7-year-old handwriting, it read, "Happy birthday, Grandma. Thank you for teaching Mommy and Daddy how to be better. I love you so much. Love, Emma." I looked up to find David and Paige watching me with tears in their eyes. She insisted on writing that herself. Paige said softly. She said she wanted to thank you for helping our family heal. In that moment, I understood that my journey hadn't just been about standing up for myself. It had been about teaching my family how to love better, how to treat each other with respect, how to value the people in their lives before they lost them. As the afternoon sun slanted through my garden and my family laughed together around my patio table, I felt something I'd been missing for almost a year. Hope for our future together. By October, my life had settled into a new rhythm. My social media following had stabilized at just over 1 million people, and I'd found my groove creating content that helped people navigate difficult family relationships. I was also working on my book, Choosing Dignity, a guide to standing up for yourself at any age, which my publisher expected to be ready for release in the spring. But the most significant change was in my relationship with David and Paige. The slow work of rebuilding trust was paying off. David had become more assertive in our conversations, willing to express his own needs and opinions rather than just trying to manage everyone else's emotions. Paige had done the deeper work of addressing her insecurities, and while we would never be close friends, we had developed a respectful relationship based on honesty rather than pretense. The real test came in early November, when Paige called me directly for the first time since Christmas. "Margaret, I have something I need to discuss with you, and I want to handle it the right way this time."
I'm listening.
David's company is transferring him to their Portland office after the first of the year. It's a promotion, a really good opportunity for him, but it means we'll be moving across the country. My first instinct was panic. After all the work we'd done to rebuild our relationship, they were leaving? I'd miss watching Emma grow up, miss the weekly dinners we'd started having, miss the slow healing of our family. But then I took a breath and recognized this for what it was. Paige doing exactly what I'd asked her to do. She was telling me about a major life change directly, honestly, and early enough for us to discuss it together. "How do you feel about the move?" I asked. Excited about David's career, nervous about starting over in a new place, and honestly, worried about how it will affect our relationship with you. "We've all worked so hard to get to a good place." "We have," I agreed. "And that work doesn't disappear because you moved to Oregon. We'll figure out how to maintain our relationship across the distance." We talked for an hour, discussing everything from video calls with Emma to potential visits to how we'd handle holidays. It was the kind of open, honest conversation that would have been impossible a year ago. "Margaret," Paige said before we hung up, "I want you to know something. Moving away from you isn't a relief for me anymore. A year ago it might have been.
But now?
I'm genuinely sad about it. You've become important to me. Not just as David's mother, but as someone I respect and care about." Thank you for saying that, Paige. And thank you for handling this conversation the way you did. It means a lot. That night, I made a video about accepting change and loss while maintaining boundaries. Sometimes, I told the camera, the people we love will make choices that take them away from us, even after we've rebuilt our relationships. And that's okay. Love isn't about keeping people close through manipulation or guilt. It's about supporting their growth and happiness, even when it's hard for us. I talked about the difference between someone leaving because they don't value you and someone leaving because life takes them in a different direction. The relationships that survive distance are the ones built on genuine respect and affection. The ones that don't, well, maybe they weren't as strong as we thought. The comments on that video were filled with people sharing their own experiences of long-distance relationships with family members and the strategies they developed for maintaining connection across miles. But the comment that touched me most came from Paige. "Thank you for this perspective, Margaret. I promise we'll make this work." As Thanksgiving approached, I found myself in the strange position of hosting my last holiday dinner with David's family for the foreseeable future. Instead of making me sad, though, it filled me with gratitude for how far we'd all come. The dinner was small, just the four of us, but it felt significant in a way that our previous gatherings never had. There was no tension, no walking on eggshells, no unspoken resentments simmering beneath the surface. Just a family that had learned to communicate honestly and treat each other with respect. "I want to say something," David announced as we sat down to eat. "A year ago, our family was broken. Not because of some external crisis, but because we had forgotten how to be kind to each other. We had taken each other for granted and lost sight of what really mattered." He looked at me with tears in his eyes. "Mom, you could have written us off completely. You could have decided we weren't worth the effort of rebuilding. Instead, you demanded better from us and then gave us the chance to rise to your expectations." Paige nodded, adding, "You could have made this easy on yourself by just accepting our apologies and pretending nothing had happened. Instead, you insisted that we do the hard work of actually changing. And that made all the difference." Emma, who had been listening with the serious expression she wore when adults were discussing important things, suddenly spoke up. "I'm glad Mommy learned how to be nicer to Grandma Margaret. Now everybody is happy, and we can have dinner together without anyone being sad." Out of the mouths of babes. After dinner, as we were cleaning up, Emma tugged on my sleeve. "Grandma Margaret, when we move to Oregon, will you still be my grandma?" "Oh, sweetheart," I said, kneeling down to her level. "I will always be your grandma, no matter where you live. Distance can't change that. But how will I show you the flowers I grow?" "We'll figure that out. Maybe you can send me pictures, or we can video chat, or I can come visit you in your new house. Promise. I promise. That night, I started planning what would become a regular feature of my channel, advice for maintaining long-distance family relationships. I interviewed therapists, relationship experts, and regular people who had successfully navigated family moves and separations. The series was incredibly popular, particularly among older adults whose children had moved away for career opportunities. Many of them had been struggling with feeling abandoned or forgotten, and my content helped them reframe the situation in healthier ways. Your children's success isn't a rejection of you, I said in one video. It's a reflection of how well you raised them. If they're confident enough to take risks and pursue opportunities, that's something to be proud of, not something to take personally. As November turned into December, I found myself surprisingly calm about the approaching Christmas season. A year ago, Christmas had been a source of trauma and pain. This year, it felt like an opportunity to create new traditions and celebrate how far we'd all come. David and Paige were planning a Christmas Eve dinner before their move in early January. It would be our last Christmas together for a while, and I wanted it to be perfect. But perfect, I'd learned, didn't mean without conflict or completely smooth. Perfect meant honest, authentic, and full of love that came with respect. And for the first time in my adult life, I knew I could count on having exactly that. Christmas Eve 2024 arrived with fresh snow and clear skies, just as it had the year before. But this time, when I got dressed for dinner, I chose a deep purple dress that made me feel confident and beautiful, not because I was desperate for approval, but because I enjoyed looking my best for celebrations with people I loved. I spent the morning in my kitchen, preparing dishes for our dinner. Not because I had to prove my worth through service, but because I genuinely enjoyed cooking for my family and wanted to contribute to our celebration. The difference in motivation was everything. When I arrived at David and Paige's house at 4 p.m., Emma ran to the door before I could even knock. "Grandma Margaret, you're here," she squealed, throwing herself into my arms. "I wouldn't miss it for the world, sweetheart," I said, hugging her tight. David appeared behind her, smiling genuinely.
Mom.
"Thank you for coming." "Thank you for inviting me," I replied, and I meant it. This invitation felt different from all the others, not obligatory or guilt-driven, but genuine. Paige emerged from the kitchen, flour in her hair and a smile on her face. "Margaret, I'm so glad you're here. I could actually use some help with the pie crust. Mine keeps falling apart." "I'd be happy to help," I said, following her into the kitchen. We worked side by side for 20 minutes, and for the first time in our 8-year relationship, it felt natural. We talked about Emma's upcoming transition to a new school, about David's excitement over his promotion, about my book launch planned for the spring. "I've been reading your draft chapters," Paige said as we rolled out pie dough. "They're really good. Honest but not bitter. Helpful without being preachy." "Thank you. That's exactly what I was hoping for. I know I'm mentioned in the book, and I know I don't come off well in some parts." I paused in my rolling. "Paige, I tried to be fair. I included my own mistakes and growth, not just yours. And I focused on the lessons learned rather than just recounting the hurt." "I know, and I appreciate that. I also appreciate that you showed me the relevant sections before publishing. That couldn't have been easy." She was right. It hadn't been easy, but it had been the right thing to do. Dinner was everything I'd hoped it would be. We talked and laughed and enjoyed each other's company without any undercurrent of tension or unspoken resentment. Emma chattered about her new school and her excitement about living near mountains. David shared his hopes for his new position. Paige talked about her plans to volunteer at an animal shelter in Portland. But the moment that meant the most came when Emma stood up to make a toast. "I want to say something," she announced, holding up her glass of apple cider with 8-year-old solemnity. "I'm sad we're moving away from Grandma Margaret, but I'm happy that we learned how to be a good family." And I'm proud of my mommy for saying sorry when she made mistakes.
She turned to me.
And I'm proud of my grandma for teaching all of us how to be better. I had to excuse myself to the bathroom to compose myself after that. Later, as we were cleaning up, David pulled me aside. Mom, I have something for you. A Christmas gift, but also something more. He handed me a small wrapped box. Inside was a beautiful silver locket. Open it, he said softly. Inside the locket were 2 photos, one of Robert and me on our wedding day, and one of Emma and me in my garden from this past summer. I wanted you to have something that reminded you that you're always loved, always valued, always part of our family, no matter where we are. David, this is beautiful. Thank you. There's something else, he said. I've been thinking about what you said about actions speaking louder than words. So, I want you to know, we're planning to visit you for Easter. And this summer, we want you to come to Portland for a week. And every year after that, we want to make sure we have dedicated time together that's just about enjoying each other's company. You've really thought this through. I've learned that good intentions aren't enough. I need to make concrete plans and follow through on them. As the evening wound down and it came time for me to leave, I felt something I'd been missing for so long. The warm satisfaction of being truly wanted and valued by my family. Emma hugged me goodbye with tears in her eyes. I'm going to miss you so much, Grandma Margaret. I'm going to miss you too, sweetheart. But we're going to stay close, I promise. Paige hugged me next, and for the first time, it didn't feel awkward or obligatory. Thank you, she whispered in my ear, for not giving up on us, for showing us how to do better. Thank you for being willing to do the work, I replied. David walked me to my car, just as he had hundreds of times before. But this time felt different. Mom, I know this year has been hard. I know we put you through hell and back. But I want you to know, you saved our family. Not by being accommodating or keeping the peace, but by demanding better. You taught us all what love with dignity looks like. I'm proud of all of us, I said. We did the hard work. We chose healing over comfort. That's not easy, but it's worth it. As I drove home through the quiet Christmas Eve streets, I passed the same houses I'd driven by exactly 1 year ago. Once again, they glowed with warm light and holiday celebrations. But this time, I wasn't looking in from the outside. I was driving home from my own family celebration, carrying the warm glow of being loved and valued inside me. When I got home, I sat down to write my Christmas video, the one that would close out this chapter of my journey. Hello, beautiful souls, I began, looking directly into the camera with no disguise, no hiding, just Margaret Gerard in all her imperfect authenticity. A year ago today, I was turned away from my family's Christmas dinner. It was the worst day of my life, but also the most important one. I paused, thinking about the woman I'd been 12 months ago. That night taught me that sometimes the people we love most will hurt us in ways we never imagined possible. But it also taught me that we get to choose how we respond to that hurt. We can disappear quietly, or we can stand up and demand better. I leaned forward, speaking directly to all the people who had followed my journey and found inspiration in it. I chose to demand better.
And you know what?
I got it. Not immediately, not easily, but eventually. Because when you know your worth and refuse to settle for less, people either rise to meet your standards or reveal that they're not worthy of space in your life. I shared the highlights of my family's healing process, emphasizing the work and time it had taken to rebuild trust. Forgiveness isn't a light switch that you flip on because someone says sorry. It's a dimmer that you adjust gradually as people prove, through consistent actions, that they've genuinely changed. I concluded the video with a message of hope for anyone spending Christmas alone because they'd chosen dignity over dysfunction. To everyone who made the hard choice to protect your peace instead of enabling others' poor behavior, you are not alone. You are not wrong. You are not too sensitive or too demanding. You are worthy of love that comes with respect, and you should never settle for less. As I uploaded the video, I thought about the extraordinary year that had transformed me from a woman who accepted whatever treatment she received into someone who demanded and received respect. The hurt of that Christmas night would always be part of my story. But it was no longer the defining chapter. Instead, it had become the catalyst for discovering who I really was when I stopped trying to please everyone else. I was Margaret Gerard. I was 58 years old, single, and happier than I'd been in decades. I had friends who valued my company, followers who appreciated my wisdom, family members who were learning to treat me with the respect I'd always deserved, and most importantly, a relationship with myself built on truth and dignity rather than fear and people-pleasing. Tomorrow would be Christmas Day, the first anniversary of my transformation. Instead of mourning it, I planned to celebrate it, because that was the night Margaret Gerard learned to value herself. And that lesson had changed everything. Christmas morning dawned clear and cold, with fresh snow covering my garden like a clean slate. I woke up early, not from anxiety, but from excitement. Today marked exactly 1 year since the night that changed my life, and I wanted to acknowledge it properly. I dressed carefully in a new burgundy dress, not because I was desperate for approval, but because I enjoyed looking my best for myself. I spent time on my hair and makeup, not to hide my age, but to celebrate who I'd become. My phone buzzed with messages throughout the morning. David, sending photos of Emma opening presents in Portland. Paige, sharing a picture of their Christmas breakfast with the caption, "Thinking of you today, Margaret." Gloria, checking in to see how I was doing on this anniversary. But the message that meant the most came from a username I didn't recognize. "Thank you, Ms. D. Your story gave me the courage to leave my emotionally abusive daughter's house and find my own apartment. For the first time in years, I'm spending Christmas alone, and I'm happy. Merry Christmas from another woman who chose dignity." I spent the afternoon working in my greenhouse, tending to the plants that would bloom in spring. The physical work was meditative, giving me time to reflect on the journey that had brought me here. At 3 p.m., my doorbell rang. I opened it to find a delivery person holding a beautiful arrangement of winter flowers. The card read, "Mom, thank you for teaching us that love and respect aren't opposites, they're partners. We love you. Merry Christmas. David, Paige, and Emma." I placed the flowers on my dining table and sat down to record my final video of the year. "Hello, beautiful souls," I began, looking into the camera with a smile. Today marks exactly 1 year since I was turned away from my family's Christmas dinner. 12 months ago, I thought my life was over. Today, I know it was just beginning. I talked about the journey of the past year, the pain and growth, the anger and healing, the fear and courage. I learned that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you can also be the best thing, if you're willing to let it teach you who you really are. I looked directly into the camera, speaking to all the people who had shared this journey with me. To everyone who has followed my story, who has shared their own experiences, who has found the courage to stand up for themselves. Thank you. You've made this journey meaningful in ways I never could have imagined. I paused, feeling the weight of the moment. The old Margaret would have spent today mourning what she'd lost. The new Margaret is celebrating what she's found, herself. As the sun set on Christmas Day 2024, I sat in my living room with a cup of tea, surrounded by the life I'd built for myself. My book manuscript sat on the table, ready for final editing. My phone showed messages from friends around the world who had been inspired by my story. My house felt like a home again, filled with my own energy and choices rather than the desperate need for other people's approval. I was Margaret Gerard. I was 58 years old, and I had never been more proud of who I was or more excited about who I was still becoming. The best revenge I'd learned wasn't making other people suffer. It was becoming so authentically, unapologetically yourself that their opinion of you became irrelevant. And that, my beautiful souls, was a lesson worth sharing. Thank you for joining Margaret on her incredible journey of transformation and self-discovery. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt discarded or diminished by people who should have valued you, remember this: your worth isn't determined by other people's ability to see it. You have the power to choose how you respond to poor treatment, and sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply refusing to disappear quietly. Margaret's story reminds us that it's never too late to find your voice, set boundaries, and demand the respect you deserve. Whether you're dealing with difficult family members, toxic relationships, or anyone who tries to diminish your worth, you always have the choice to stop accepting unacceptable behavior. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss another story that might speak directly to your soul. Share this video with someone who needs to hear Margaret's message. And remember, you are worthy of respect, kindness, and love, especially from the people closest to you. Until next time, keep walking your journey with dignity, courage, and unshakable self-worth. You deserve nothing less.